Ever since the collapse of Yugoslavia in the 1990s, Bosnia-Herzegovina has lost 24% of its population, Serbia 9% and Croatia 15%. In the same time period, Albania has lost 12, Romania 18, Bulgaria 21, and Moldova a whopping 32%. On current projections, which are beyond terrifying, by the year 2050, Bulgaria will have 39% fewer people than it did in 1990. Serbia will have 24% fewer, Croatia 23%, and Romania 30%. Humans have been migrating between regions, countries, and continents since the dawn of civilization. Such voluntary and involuntary circulation of people is therefore seen as normal and quote-unquote natural. Yet, the scenes that can be witnessed at Serbian and Bosnian border crossings at the end of each holiday season, backed up with these disturbing statistics, are truly disheartening. Hundreds of thousands of precarious people crossing into lands unknown, seeking a better life while leaving everything behind. As someone who regularly has to endure 2, 3, 5-hour waits at the border with Croatia during these holiday rush hours, where half of the country suddenly disappears, I've had more than enough time to reflect on this peculiar situation and, like most people, come to the rather uncontroversial conclusion that this cannot be natural or normal. These words are often used to minimize the significance of a certain phenomenon. They are the go-to cynical dialogue option for all those who cold-heartedly and impotently accept all the evils of the status quo, including this one. They're used by those who shrug their shoulders at all of the injustices and tragedies of this godforsaken planet and use their infinite wisdom to conclude that that's how the world works and how all of that is natural and inevitable. All such armchair doomer philosophers may be surprised to hear that although something self-evidently has been the paradigm during the past millennia, not every evil in this world is predetermined or unavoidable. We collectively do have the capacity to comprehend and take at least part of it into our own hands, and influence such sinister dynamics. We're capable of slowing down our own nosedive into the abyss, and can indeed be the shapers of our own destinies, opposed to, being the personification of a limp dick. So, as always, the first step in tackling any problem is comprehending the systemic causes of its symptoms. Just like a doctor would investigate the root cause of a patient's ailments, such as an underlying virus, bacteria, or cancerogenic cell, opposed to lazy, symptomatic treatment of that which is visible only on the surface. So, the purpose of this video is exactly that, to provide some answers about why the Balkans are losing so many people and literally disappearing from the face of the earth, and how we may act to undo the damage. Now, there are many ways to describe these sorry sights, yet the term that might be most fitting is brain drain. It refers to the phenomenon of highly skilled and educated individuals emigrating from their home country in search of better economic and educational opportunities elsewhere, particularly to Western Europe. Lack of economic opportunities, low wages, bad working conditions, political corruption and nepotism, incredibly corrupt educational institutions and universities are just a few of the reasons of why people from Bosnia, Serbia, Albania, and Bulgaria clog the border crossings of the European Union every few months, providing us with these pitiful spectacles. What is left behind are empty streets, abandoned houses and buildings, crumbling economies, and lost futures. Now, natural migration and naturalization of people in other countries is indeed a regular occurrence since the dawn of time, but there is something very bizarre about these specific circumstances. Most people aren't naturalizing and integrating into these societies as one would imagine, as they tend to use every last moment of spare time driving back and forth to their home country to visit their families or merely spend time there. They are, for the most part, merely guest workers who plan on retiring back in their homeland and who have come to reap the benefits of a nonetheless foreign system that allows them to live at least with some dignity. There is no lust for the discovery of foreign lands and cultures, but mostly economic desperation and concern for the future of themselves and their children that is driving their endeavors. With the fall of the Eastern Bloc, this trend of mass emigration from Eastern Europe was only accelerated with unfathomable velocity, so that since the 1990s, the population of Albania has been decreasing by some 2% every year, of Bulgaria and North Macedonia 1%, and Serbia, Slovenia and Croatia 0.5% per year. According to the paper World Population Prospects for 2022, a more recent document by the UN, Bosnia and Herzegovina has managed to get the incredible achievement of being the #1 country in the world in terms of declining population statistics, with a 1.5% population loss every single year. This is further accompanied by concerningly low birth rates, which are not the focus of this video, but nonetheless play a substantial role in the dramatic population decline and share most of the same causes. However, percentages and statistics, as baffling as these are, rarely manage to reflect the true picture of what is going on. In the case of immigration records such as these, they often vastly underestimate the number of people who are actually residing outside their home country, since they often, for obvious political reasons, do not take into consideration seasonal workers, those who still retain an official residence in their country, or those who regularly vote and somewhat participate in the economy. The interest of the political establishment is, of course, to conceal the ever more terrifying figures and estimates. What they cannot conceal, however, are the reasons why these people are forced to leave in the first place, or the extent of their desire to do so. An FES youth study in southeastern Europe reveals that the main reasons for leaving their home country among the youth primarily include improvement of the standard of living, better employment opportunities, higher salaries, and better education. Moreover, the desire to leave their country of origin is skyrocketing to concerning levels among the youth, with the same study showing some truly depressing percentages, especially among non-EU members such as Albania, North Macedonia, Kosovo, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Montenegro, where around a third of all young adults are willing to move out. When asked about their desired length of stay, young adults of Bosnia, North Macedonia, and Albania seem especially eager to leave their countries for as long as humanly possible. Crippling uncertainty and precariousness of a lifestyle that cannot be even described as paycheck to paycheck, since paychecks sometimes do not even arrive, but rather as hoarding of unsustainable loans on the backs of future generations, is compelling people to depart from their home country by all means possible. This economic decay then further facilitates the decay of the social fabric, which is suffocating in nepotism, partocracy, corruption, nationalism, and other ailments that only help cement the decision to leave. Every hope that this is a dying trend in the midst of increasing European integration and GDP growth that politicians love to boast about could not be further from the truth. Visa liberalizations and encroachment of the European Union upon the Western Balkans has only accelerated the immigration trend, as the arrival of European democracy isn't seen as an opportunity to improve living standards, but an open invitation to leave at once, as efficiently as possible, with a shiny new European passport in the hand. Attempts to conjure an illusion of incoming prosperity through continued market liberalizations, privatizations, and foreign investment are therefore contemptuous, cynical, and scornful to the very core. If all these hallmarks of capitalism that we've been experiencing since the 1990s truly are benevolent, how can we explain the fact that, since the fall of socialism, the stock of migrants from the ex-Yugoslavia region has doubled, reaching almost 4.6 million in 2019, which would be an entire average-sized Yugoslav republic vanished in the matter of a couple of decades of the promised capitalist utopia. Unsurprisingly, the emigration rate from the Western Balkans has increased by at least 10% over the past decade alone, so that today about 1/5 of the ex-Yugoslav republic's population resides abroad. Whereas in countries like Albania and Bosnia and Herzegovina, the share of emigrants amounts to 40% of the resident population. So, all this raises the question, what exactly is the reason for this devastating trend? Is it an unfortunate, isolated circumstance that randomly came by because of a few fatal decisions by certain political figures, or does the fault lie in our inferiority and incapability as a people to do better? Are we just incapable of building a better society, compared to those hustling Germans and Brits? The answer is, of course, much more complicated, yet it shatters both of these illusions. You may have already seen one of my previous videos, titled The Depressing Journey from Germany to Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I've already talked about the phenomenon of the depressing transition in the quality of infrastructure, buildings, environment, and standards of living on the relatively short journey from the imperial core in Germany down deep into the periphery of Europe in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That video essentially serves as the basis of this one, in the sense that it provides a good visual reference to the dire situation that we're in. And since the root cause for both the crumbling infrastructure explored in that video and mass immigration in this one is basically identical, let us once again take a quick glance at the systemic origins of this deeply rooted disease that is turning these nations into patients whose recovery is becoming more unlikely with each passing day. The general laws of the development of capitalism, our prevailing socioeconomic system, have divided the world in several interesting ways. Its turbulent historical development has, through a number of lucky circumstances, consolidated immense industrial, economic, military, and political powers into the claws of a bloc of countries that have been at the forefront of scientific discoveries and industrial revolutions ever since. Due to a plethora of equally unlucky circumstances, nations of the Balkan Peninsula have pulled the short end of the stick, and were destined to be the overexploited periphery of the global capitalist system, as lucrative sources of natural resources and cheap labor power that has been openly and covertly coerced into being the servants of the ruling classes of imperial powers and invisible sources of wealth used to bribe their labor aristocracies. With blame to be cast both at the predatory ruthlessness and greed of the capitalist class at the helm of these empires, their ignorant, bribed, and egotistical working class, but also the local stooges and servants of these foreign overlords who have sold their soul and their people's future for some petty semblance of political power, we must come to the conclusion that these invisible historical processes are indeed systemic and deeply embedded into the very logic of the development of human socio-economic systems. It is a universal logic that can hardly be grasped by a single human mind, let alone steered or influenced by the heroic or villainous actions of individual people. Such abstract, systemic problems therefore require abstract and systemic solutions, not peaceful reforms and endless dialogue that target individual problems in their isolation. This overall geopolitical constellation and power arrangement shows itself in various interesting ways that can be investigated individually. For example, value transference and unequal exchange deals between core and periphery, the extraction of super profits and natural resources, the penetration of monopolistic corporations and destruction of local industries through predatory acquisitions and military interventions, direct political subservience and vassalage through instruments such as the European Union, and so on. However, you may be surprised to hear that this has not always been the case. The Balkans and Eastern Europe, more broadly, have indeed had a period of growth and prosperity, a period which elevated their industries and patriarchal societies out of medieval backwardness and provided the peoples of Eastern Europe a life of dignity, with free education and healthcare, affordable housing and utilities, guaranteed employment and workers' rights, and much, much more. Such incredible achievements of socialism and self-management, as much as their implementations were of course flawed and troubled in more ways than one, and deserve to be criticized as much as everything else, have nonetheless left behind a specter of what could have been, of untapped potential and a lost future. With the arrival of free market barbarism through privatization and liberalization, Eastern Europe has crumbled into a bottomless pit across every single metric. For an overview of this undeniable fall from grace in the midst of the ruthless restoration of capitalism in the former Eastern Bloc that promised a consumer utopia, make sure to watch my video collaboration with Yugopnik on how capitalism destroyed Eastern Europe. Combined with the video on imperialism, it should provide you with enough context for understanding how this tragic decline historically began and progressed. Nonetheless, today's focus is mass immigration and brain drain from the Balkan Peninsula in particular, which is often described with a peculiar concept called human capital flight, one that should get more credit for its bluntness and honesty, and that gives us a perfect insight into the reasoning of the system that surrounds us, making it the perfect mask-off phrase that unintentionally reveals its true nature and priorities. When describing the situation in the Balkans, Western sources cite a shrinking population and reduced labor force, a changing age structure, and a quote-unquote decrease in the quality of human capital as the chief consequences of such trends. Not ruined human lives, disconnected families, lost futures. No, decrease in the quality of human capital. This disgusting term comes from the market logic of the corporate world, and is used to describe the loss of quote-unquote human capital in the midst of such emigrations. Unsurprisingly, they do not seem to view humans as beings made of flesh and blood with emotions and lives, but as human capital, a commodity that can be invested in and wielded for economic goals. This very approach of reifying not only the natural elements and living creatures of this planet into expendable commodities, but also human beings into nothing but wielders of the commodity that they are most interested in, labor power, lays at the very foundation of the logic of capitalism. Everything is seen as an instrument of making more money, of creating more capital in an endless cycle of accumulation and consolidation into fewer and fewer hands, with complete disregard to the social and environmental consequences. The human capital that is fleeing the Balkan Peninsula and other peripheral regions of the world is both skilled and unskilled. Balkan guest workers are both the stereotypical construction workers and janitors and the doctors and engineers who have allegedly come to steal jobs. In the 1960s, it was indeed mostly low-skilled workers who emigrated, but thereafter and since the early 2000s, it was mostly young, educated people who have decided to leave. It's worth mentioning that many of those categorized as unskilled are often in fact fairly educated individuals who merely aren't skilled in the local language and are forced to do several demeaning low-paid jobs and toil away ungodly hours on a nondescript construction site somewhere in Sweden or Austria, unknowingly setting the invisible foundations for the illusion of self-sufficient prosperity of the Western world. All the shiny buildings, the pristine infrastructure, and impeccable economic system was built on the backs of such guest workers, going as far as the aftermath of World War II, where the peoples of Yugoslavia, Greece, Albania, Bulgaria, and Turkey kept finding ways to emigrate to the Promised Land, often unsatisfied with the foundational social benefits offered by their local brand of socialism, such as free healthcare and education, in search for more magnificent promises of consumerism and overabundance that the capitalist utopia allegedly had to offer. As we have already established in the previous chapter, capital unmistakably flows from the periphery to the core through various forms of predatory value extraction. Since human labor power is handled as a commodity and human beings as a form of capital with monetary potential, it should not be surprising to conclude that these very immigration routes are indeed identical to capital flows. The shattering of the Eastern Bloc has unlocked a great deal of untapped human capital that now lay available for the exploitation by giant Western industries, both within the borders of the newly established marionette banana republics and in the promised lands far beyond. The demolition of political and economic sovereignty has left these countries vulnerable to the predatory political machinations and economic shenanigans of the giants of capital from the imperial core, creating a magnet that continues to suck away chunks of the desperate population. This ruthless current of capital and people being washed away towards the core of global imperialism is exactly what we are witnessing today, with these spine-chilling statistics and depressing sights. So, with all these sinister and seemingly uncontrollable dynamics in mind, the search for a viable solution is obviously going to be more complicated than the tiring liberal plea for some more democracy, more privatization, more liberalization, more European integration, or a better mentality. Such empty, surface-level platitudes and band-aid solutions have, after 30 years of continuous parroting, proven to be fruitless and only more devastating to our dire situation. We have seen beyond a shadow of doubt that there is no election, no political party, individual politician, or foreign savior that can turn our fortunes and make people stay. Bribing the populace with short-term and one-time monetary handouts or patriotic platitudes in the midst of a crumbling socioeconomic order will not stop the torrent of immigration either. Many people instinctively recognize that what we need is systemic change. Not new elections, parliamentary amendments, GDP percentages, or nationalistic songs. However, systemic change does not translate into building a social democracy like that in Germany, Sweden, or France, through parliamentary reforms and hopeful political calculations of a few honest, non-corrupt politicians. The socioeconomic system of each Balkan country and that of imperial core countries such as Germany or France is essentially the same. The only difference is that we drew the shorter end of the stick and got to experience the other side of capitalism, together with the rest of the developing world. This global system has its winners and losers, and there is no geopolitical spiel we can hope to play to improve our position. The law of uneven development and all other aspects of imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism have destined our corner of the world to serve as the gold mine and breadbasket for the appetites of the developed world. The self-sufficiency of Western social democracy is therefore an illusion. It is only sustainable with the direct and indirect exploitation of the Third World, the Balkans included. So, what would true systemic change even mean, then? Well, there is no blueprint or predetermined course for achieving a post-capitalist society, but some of the main hallmarks would include cutting deep at the roots of the disease, seeking the abolishment of private property, wage labor, the profit motive, and all other tentacles of capital. These are the sources of every evil that plagues our societies, and there is no reforming, tinkering, ameliorating, or humanizing of this system that can make the symptoms of this disease bearable for the vast majority of people and make them stay in their homelands. As we have come to conclude many times over on this channel, only revolution can give us hope for a better future. And with entire towns of young people disappearing with each passing year, we have to continue seeking this systemic change before it becomes too late.